Alright, howdy folks. My name's Hamilton, and today I'm gonna show you how I build a view in Loom. Uh, First things first, I just want you to be very kind to me. Uh, it's been a while. Wow, honestly, I've never really done a live coding stream before. I guess it's not a stream, it's a video on demand. My dog's here in the room with me. She might bark, she might growl. There's other people in the house. The AC might kick on. Look, this isn't a high-end video production. This is instead a peek behind the curtain at how I build things, how we build things at Loom, and really just an attempt to try and pop the hood and show things. The other caveat I will give at the beginning of this presentation or demo is that not only is this a live demo, I haven't prepared for it. I'm working off the cuff. I also haven't worked like actively in the Loom code base in a year or two. So I don't really remember how everything works. So you and I are going on a learning journey together. But to start with, let me see if I can kind of lay things out a bit. And so actually, I think even before we write some code, I'm going to do my favorite thing, which is just whiteboarding. So, also, shout out to Odysseus for providing the 100 minutes of blissful chill wave that'll be underlining this little vid. So, check him out. Anyway, so before even writing code or vibe coding, you should have a pretty good idea of or not even a pretty good idea, but you should have some sort of an idea of what you want to do. So today we're building a little budget tool. Oh God, it's terrible text. Is that font? Yeah, so we're building a budget view. So for starters, if you're not familiar, a view is one of the core building blocks of Loom, right? So this is really what it's all about. The views are where user value comes from inside of Loom. There's no view, there's no tools. If there's no tools, there's no users. So a view consists of some front end svelte. They are bound to a space. That's another concept. And then that space anchors the backend data. So those are the entities and ties that relate everything together. So basically, following that very abstract data model, basically we're trying to understand three things, right? How do we get user data? How do we collect user data? You'll often see this pop up on front-end engineering, and basically in form design. How do we retrieve data, right? And then So you gotta put the data in. That's the create. You gotta retrieve the data. That's the read. And then you basically like, how do we manage data? And these are like the updates and deletes, right? So this create, read, update, delete, right? And these mechanisms, this is also what you'll often hear people refer to as CRUD, right? And all data systems really boil down to CRUD actions. It's just how complicated do you want to get about what triggers creations, what triggers reads, what triggers updates, and what triggers deletes. And usually once you get into that place of like certain user actions, i.e. certain user actions creating data, lead to a lot of reads and updates and deletes and other creations and other reads and other updates and deletes. And those chains are usually referred to as, that's your business logic usually. So, okay. So, all that being said, who gives a shit, right? So we want to build this budget, right? And I think for building this budget, boof. Not as magical as Miro. So for this budget view, okay, let's pick up the pen, right? So, or actually, no, still. So, 3 things we want to collect from the budget view, right? We want to, when you're tracking a budget, basically what you're doing is you're trying to track your money in. You allocate that pot of incoming money to categories of spending. That's your budget. And then you track your actual spending against your budget, and so you know where to correct on things. So, obviously if you have $1,000 coming in and you're spending $5,000 on candles and your family's dying, you probably do want to spend less on candles. You maybe only want to spend $50 or $100 on candles. So anyway, so as far as the form goes, probably the most important thing is we need to track money in, right? This is going to be, I think, the sort of simplest element of the view, right? So we can kind of have this sort of, neutral, clean, sparkly. There's like going to be like some little welcome text, and then you just have like like an entry form here, right? Hey, welcome to the budget view. Doesn't look like we don't have any data for you. How much money do you make per month, right? And then you type that in here. Boop, boop. Hit submit, and then the view updates to a budget form. So, okay, and then since this is Loom, we've obviously got we've got our little sidebar here. So, right, once you know, then we can just have a little box that's like, okay, here's what you're working with, right? Here's your total. And then maybe at some point we have like an edit button, but a lot of what we're talking about here, right, is when you're designing these things, you want to really you want to cut out. Sorry, when you're designing, you want to cover your bases. When you're implementing, you want to cut scope. That's generally the perspective that I take. Because the sooner you implement something usable, something holistic, something that you can put in front of users, the sooner you get your feedback, the sooner you find your bugs. So, for now, no edit flow on your budget input. It's just like whatever, you hit it in, don't fat finger it, you're good to go. And the thing is Loom is flexible enough that if you know how this works, you should just be able to like right-click this entity and just edit the data directly. But for now, right? Cool. So there's your total budget. I'm sure there's a magic word we can use for that, but Then we'll have another magic word, and we'll start saying, okay, time to start adding categories. So right, here's a text box, here's a money box, here's another submit button, right? So we say, you know, here's our candle budget, and we're only going to spend $50 on candles, and we hit submit, and then we still got our magic little budget here, right? Here's our pretty boy up here. We still have our text box and submitted, right? This stuff clears out. We still have our instructions, but then below it, right, we'll have a new little row, right? Here's our text. Here's what we've allocated for it. Here's some, like, you know, here's where, right, that tier 3, that edit, delete shit, that'll go over there, but like we won't need that to start with. And so, sorry, I got ahead of myself. This will then also cover number 2, money out, right? And then maybe we want some like feedback here on in versus out. Basically, have we allocated all of our dollars, or have we over allocated all of our dollars, right? Or have we under allocated? So kind of with this in mind, I think we're kind of ready to dive in, right? So I'm trying to think about where to start. So if I were fancy and cool and had a clean code base, maybe not a clean code base, but a more organized, a more familiar code base, I might actually experiment with like a little vibe coding here, but I'm not. So I'm going to do the next best thing, which is I'm going to copy and paste something that kind of looks like this and go from there. So what is that? Which of our views is that? So, well, let's go check out some views, right? So anyway, so we're in Loom. I'm gonna run npx grow dev. This runs the grow build command, or this runs the grow build tool and the dev command within it. So grow is a open source build tool that my previous partner implemented. It was originally designed to, I think, fix slowdowns in the build process for TypeScript. But in the intervening years, TypeScript has optimized its build tools, and so it basically exists as kind of a fancy npm run. That's kind of one of those bugbears in the code base that I think we should get rid of at some point. But it's also so low in the foundations of the code that I haven't been inspired to do anything about that. So anyway, so Grow comes with a bunch of like built-in tasks, of which dev is one, and it looks like we haven't overwritten it yet. So we have a site deploy task here. Oh no, those are they're baked-in tasks. See, ground for tasks. Okay, cool. Yeah, so dev, I believe the dev task that we're using is the default dev task for Grow. So anyway, so now that it's running, we can go to our local host, sign in. Cool. Here's what a development environment looks like. It's been auto-populated with stuff. So I think I think lists or lists is probably the format that we want to base stuff off of. So like whatever this list is, I think that would be the money out like budget categories, and then we could just have like an additional sort of like top level entity that's just the money in, right? And obviously, of course, well, maybe not, of course, in the really fancy version, we would deal with number 3, right, which is, of course, the ledger, the actual money that is being spent, and there would be some sort of upload panel for managing that and making sure that your uploaded ledger items align with your categories. And what the thing is like this out of scope. I'm not going to be able to do that in an hour. That's going to take its own 100 extra additional minutes of blissful chill waves, so we're not going to do that right now. So, okay. So the first thing I'm going to do, I already did it, but obviously, of course, the first thing you want to do, make a new branch. You're running locally. So views live inside lib. We call them views. I guess we also call them plugins. There's a lot of that you'll find in this code base of just like, I thought it was one thing, and maybe the docs call it another thing, and you look at the git commit history, and like the same thing has been renamed 3 different times. I always lost those fights with my business partner, or rather, he was going to do them regardless. He worked 80-hour weeks. Who was I to tell him what to do with those 80 hours? So anyway, so let's make a new folder, and we'll call this one budget, right? And ideally, we would have a workflow that, like some sort of templater or generator, but the underlying plugin view code is I would still describe it as a work in progress. So it hasn't been worth it to build those automation tools. Anyway, so we got our budget, and we got list. So I'm just going to copy everything from list over into budget, right? And we'll just go through and we'll rename things. It's not list, it's budget. It's not list controls, it's budget controls. It's not list input, it's budget input. List item, it's a budget item, and the item is inside budget items. So let's make sure all of these items are open. And so sort of roughly the way a view works then is you have your sort of top level view that is responsible for kind of hooking into the higher level platform. And then it pulls in these sort of additional components for managing the view of the data that's in this like items and items, right? So you see, so like a budget item has a, let's call it, right, list items. Of course, you click through to a list items. A list item includes a list item, and then this is where you actually render that piece of data. But so where do we start then? Where do we start from here then? So let's see. So this is some layout stuff. So well, let's go. Actually, before we even do that, here's what I like to do. I like to see stuff on screen as soon as possible. So the next thing we need to do is actually add this thing, to register this thing as a view, right? So these are the views. This is just a static file that registers components as plugins, right? So for example, and so this kind of leads to this sort of first question: should budget be creatable, right? Should you be able to make a budget view whenever you want? I think the answer is yes. For now, like the budget doesn't connect to anything, so there's no reason to hide it. There's no reason to not have multiples of them. So yeah, so let's just add it in, right? We'll call it budget. This is the component tag for it. Then we'll give it a little emoji icon, which I don't really have off the top of my head. And I'm just like a brute like this, so we'll say chart up emoji, right? I know there is a shortcut for emoji keyboards. Never remember what it is. Here's fun. Okay, right. So, next thing, right? We have a type here called view template, which has a name called vocab name. Now this, of course, lives in a different file. Don't believe this is one of our... this used to be a generated file. We used to have a bunch of generated files so that ostensibly you'd only have to make this code change in one place, but during the parting, one of the pieces of code in my business partner's code stack was pulled down or removed or deleted because he didn't think it was needed anymore, and it broke the generation thing for the whole platform. So that's why there's just a bunch of random fucking files with types in them, because these used to be generated, but now they're not. I haven't gotten around to refactoring that. So anyway, budget. Okay, so now it's playing nice. So now, if we go back to our local host, I'm going to make this in the personal one just because I don't think it makes sense to make a budget for a group at the moment. Right, here's budget. Call this Alice's. Let's just call it budget. Theoretically, you could override the default icon here too, but okay. So unknown view, budget. So this means there's another piece of the code base. These things get registered, and I've forgotten where it is. Is it view info? Nope. I don't think it's space view. Okay, here. Let's see. What are one of the? I feel like iframe is a interesting one. So components. Okay. So here we have to define these as the spell components that can be dynamically replaced. So we import budget. Complaining because we're not using it anywhere, but then we, let's see, these are cool. Now, if we go back to our development environment, cool. So, right, test, add an item, delete it, great. So, all we have here still is just the list view, right? It's just the same as this view, but now theoretically, when we go back to budget and start changing things, we'll be able to see it live. So, okay. Since we've made some progress, we've copied our lists over, we've registered the component. this is around the point that I would usually go to like commit some code and kind of like lock in what we got, right? Like we know we don't want to go back from here. This is also where I reveal my awful shame that I don't really use git console commands. I use a tool called migit at the moment. Oh god, oh god. There it is. Okay. I could add this to... I could do a lot of things with my life. Sometimes I take the hard way because I'm lazy. Because I don't do this often enough, right? Maybe I'd do it more if it was easier. Who could say? Who could say? This works for me. So, honestly, the reason I like this is mostly because it is a little slower. There is a little more friction, but if I use a GUI, I never put my Git branches in bad states. That's all it boils down to. And I think sometimes in the space of technology, people are so enamored by the idea of what the technology, what problem the technology purports to resolve, and what efficiency it promises to add to your life, that sometimes people forget about the new problems technology sometimes introduces. And anyway, that's my screed for Git GUI stuff. Anyway, we add these 5 new files. We add the component view and vocab that registers it. Let's initialize budget view. And then we commit and push. Cool. Now we can get back to coding. So. Sorry, just taking some notes. So anyway, what do we want to do? So the first thing we want to do is, I think, add a new, like, div, basically, inside here. Say div test, just because I'm always curious, you know? Oop. See? Okay, cool. So we got our little test div up here. And so I think in terms of flow, one thing we would want to do here is to do not show lists if there's no... What do we want to call this? Money in? So, here. I'm going to take a little detour. Naming's the hardest part. Let's look at a budget, right? Oof, right? Looking at cash flows. Your personal budget's probably a little closer to what we want, right? So what are the, I guess, income and expenditures? Okay, yeah, so we'll just call it income, right? First thing we want to do, we don't want to show lists if there's no income, right? But we'll get there, right? That's a UX flip. It doesn't matter if there's no income. You just don't want to confuse users when they start, right? You sort of introduce your concepts to your UX as people need them, right? And obviously the most important thing is just how much money do you have coming in. Then we can talk about where that money goes. So anyway, so I suspect list controls. Here we go. first things first. Let's rename this to, because this is gonna be category controls, right? I guess they're budget controls. So we would then rename budget controls category controls. Give our list input, and it's really this input element that we're looking for, right? Okay, so here's where we get to. So this text input component, this is baked into our system. It's part of our UI library. I think if you dig deep enough into it, you'll probably see fuzz inside of stuff. I think you might have seen it in here. Yeah, so this is fuzz. So a lot of our UX components upstream to another one of my business partners, former business partners, UX UI systems. One of the to-dos before we go into early access is basically forking this and removing it as an upstream dependency, just due to the diverging needs of the projects, let's say. So anyway, so we got a category controls, list inputs, text input. So let's see what happens if we put another one of these bad boys in here. So actually, I think what we need is a new component. We'll call this income inputs. Cool. So let's break down this. So we've got our text input component. And maybe actually text input is the wrong format, right? Let's see if there's a integer input. Nope. Anyway, I'm just curious or I'll show this off anyway. So anyway, in this case, we'll bring in the income input. Of course, it needs a input. Actually, doesn't need a list, but okay. Cool. So here you can see we've got this input. We've got our avatar here, which maybe is less of an issue if these things are obscured, but and we don't have an add item button, which is probably part of the control element, not just the inputs. So, okay. So backing up a little bit, what are we actually doing here? So this input that we're talking about is this bad boy right here, right? It's a box that takes in user data. There's a button that triggers a submission action, and that submission action returns the data to the back end, pushes it back to us where we can manage it. So go back to income input. And actually, let me go back here, right? So let's talk about Loom data structures. Loom data structures work our way from the top through structures, right? So here we go. First things first, we check to see if we're in the browser. It's because Loom is built on Svelte. Svelte does like server-side rendering. And if we're on the browser, we want to check to see if we have an open socket connection, since we use WebSockets for data transfer. If that's true, then we know that we should load entities, right? Once we're on the browser and our socket connection is open, we can query the server and pull in some entities. If that's the case, then we create a query, tell it our actor and our source ID. This is a space directory ID. So the actor ID is used for our permission system. So you need to know who's asking to load data for a system. If they don't have permission, they shouldn't get anything. Likewise, the source ID indicates, here, gonna need a whiteboard for this one. So basically the way data works in Loom, right, is you have these things called hubs. These are sort of a top-level abstraction for bounding data. Hubs have spaces. This is sort of a mid-layer abstraction. Spaces are ultimately tied to views, and then through the space, right, as this sort of interface point, transition point from what I would call like platform space. I'm doing like air quotes here. Platform space. From the platform, the space then covers the transition to the view. And the view then is what, or plugin, is what we plan to have users drive as being their actual value, right? So this is where sort of our Loom's project, like Loom's concerns, end and the plugins begin. And so kind of the way that works is that spaces, when you create a space, all spaces have create a directory entity. That's their directory entity. This is basically sort of an invisible top-level entity that sits at the top of a reference tree. And then the directory entity has ties to, lists or messages or incomes, let's say. And then these things can themselves have, this is through ties, right? These things can then have their own ties to lower level entities, right? And this is sort of how you then manage data structures within a view, right? It's to begin with, you basically just always start with this sort of directory entity, and that gives you your sort of like top level entity concepts, and then from there you can hold on to your collection of lists or your collection of messages or your collection of incomes and navigate and interface with those accordingly. So anyway, coming back to the code. So this query should return our list of top level entities, right? There's also a path system that we were hoping to. We hit some back and forth on directories, and like the ability to directly reference an entity by a path seemed like a useful abstraction to add. I think all of the pieces are in place for it. I just don't remember if we ever actually implemented an ability to look an entity up by its path. So for now, I know for sure that like this is what that will do. Okay, so to start with, we'll have the list path. Although, now that we're talking about this, I'm gonna actually change this path because it's not a list, right? It's a categories path. Rename this guy, categories. And then, kind of in the same vein, I'm going to say const income equals income. Now, I would say maybe a more robust budgeting system, you might be able to have your income broken up into multiple income streams in the same way that you might break up your expenditures by multiple outputs. What's that magic word again? That's right, that is out of scope. We only talked about one input value. It's out of scope. You want that? That's a follow-up. So. Okay, so first things first, we dereference the income, and then we should, let's see, what is this list collections? Readable entity. So this should just be a single entity, income. Path, income equals dollar entities, value, find, reference, path, and then we look up entity that has the income path, right? Obviously, if we had an actual search system in place, this wouldn't matter, but anyway. So, oh yeah, views also exist in a context where you can pull off the space that they exist within and the actor that is looking at them. So you also have access to space. In this case, we then pull off the, okay, yeah, they're mad that we're not doing anything with it. Grab our space IDs, our director IDs, our actor IDs. Kind of actually surprised we didn't do that higher up, but anyway. Cool. So if we know that we've successfully queried our data and we don't actually have a list collection, then let's init the list collection. This is actually good to know because this would be, and then you init a list collection. This is going to hand wave here because I don't quite want to go into the details, / I don't quite remember it. But basically what we do is we create a specific ordered collection here. This is a specific type of entity that carries some like unique properties that basically allow us to like move items around in it. They tell us there's an order to be maintained in this collection, and so the system needs to respond accordingly. So of course, when we're creating an entity, what do we need to know? What space is it being created in? Who is creating it? What is the path that it is being created at? Right? These entity paths. In this case, we're giving it our space, our directory, our actor ID, and the categories path. I will deal with some stuff around that later for income. I think basically when we get to probably this piece of code, but so income input. It's a program. Oh, right. So in this case, we probably need something kind of like category controls, except it's, I guess, income controls. So which I think will actually work out kind of well. So, right, so kind of going back to our design, where we've got this box here, right? If this box basically just takes up the whole space, then either we have income, in which case we show this view, or we don't have income, in which case we hide these controls, and then we just show this version of it. So, okay. So in that case, I'm going to create a new file. We're going to call it income control. And again, we're just gonna steal these category controls. still don't know where... That's why we don't have a button here. I totally missed camping and pasting the... Oh no, we do have a button over there. So where the hell is it? Oh, here it is. That's probably because we don't have control styling stuff on top of that. God, what a mess. Man, I don't know why the music just like chupped in with that. Like, we're only halfway through. Oh, right, it didn't change because we didn't change anything. So what if we do income control? Okay, cool. So now we have that. Okay. So now we got income control. Income's still mad though. So income control. Call it income. Okay, so the error here that we're seeing is basically because we copied and pasted a bunch of stuff. Income input is expecting a variable, like an input variable, still list, not income. So I'll just cut in and fix that real quick. Should we export list income? There we go. Oh, of course we need to put it right here. Okay, so let me say income. Sorry, I'm not used to vamping. Thinking too hard. Cool. Okay, yeah. So basically what was happening there is income control was mad because income wasn't undefined. But actually, I don't think we need that issue. So I'm gonna hop back in and allow income control's income to be undefined. Same here, right? Because ultimately, the difference between, and this is, I wouldn't say subtle, but like the difference between this text box and this text box is for doing ordered collections, right? Like you can see here where you need to move things around. You need to have a pre-existing collection to create the new things inside of, right? The system needs to have already created this like abstraction for holding them. This thing though, we just need to store a single value. Like it doesn't matter what's here. And either it doesn't exist, in which case we need to make it, or it does exist and we'll display it accordingly. So and I was kind of joking about like, oh, actually this should be like a number input. But the thing is it all goes into a JSON blob anyway as strings, so it's not really worth messing around with. And I think we'll be able to do what we actually need to do with it under the hood, inside the business logic, you might say. So anyway, so what is happening here? Okay, so we've finally at the root of all of this issue, right? Let's say add income, right? Again, see, add income. So what's the difference? What's going on here? What the fuck's happening? So this text input binds to our text string here in an element that we've passed in. When we submit, either clicking the button or we hit the enter button and this onSubmit function triggers, we create an entity. So we trim the content, just the text value that we're binding off this text input. If there's nothing in there, we move the elemental focus to the text box and return. Otherwise, if we have content, we need to create an entity for it. So we know who created it, right? It's our actor from our context. We know where we created it. It's our space, again, from our context. The data itself is the content. It's this text string, which I feel like I'm thinking about this and I'm trying to remember. There was a stupid fucking optimization, quote unquote optimization. It was like, oh, it's this entity type. By default, we'll just always do that. And now here I am 2 years later trying to be like, what do we actually make here? What actually gets created? But then here's the other thing, right? So that I want to point out, right? Which is, so that this is where that like list collection abstraction that I was talking about was happening, right? So you can create a tie. You can explicitly, every entity when it gets created has to be tied to another tie unless it's like a directory, right? The directory is the only thing that doesn't have a tie. It's partly how you know it's a directory. I think there's also a Boolean that identifies it as the directory. The space will point you at the directory. Again, there's a lot of corrupt in this system. I could use some love. But in the other case, where we're passing in that list collection, when you're creating categories within the list, this is what ties your entity to the list, right? The connection says, hey, list collection, you're the source, and the destination then is whatever entity gets created here. And so that's the general relationship of ties. You have a source, which is the sort of like higher level or like upstream entity, and then a destination, which is its downstream. Some systems will do like bilateral tie generation, but like we didn't mess with that because generally speaking, we're always kind of entering from this sort of like top level space context to resolve data, so it doesn't matter. Anyway, all of this is a long-winded way of saying, I think if I remember correctly, if I just delete this, it'll be fine. Yes. Which then leads to an interesting thing, right? Which is, okay, so now what? Now we have this income, who gives a shit? And so I think this would then be where we say, oh man. Okay, so we say, right, if no income, we want this text input flow. Else, of course, I like to just close my blocks accordingly. And so this would be where I'd pull the value off the income, but I don't really know what the value is going to look like until I actually create this thing. So I'm just going to kind of see what happens, right? I think we're in a place where we can test this up, right? So we have sort of, this is $1 million. That's right, folks. I make $1 million a month. Okay, cool. Great. That did not do what I wanted it to, but this is how we're learning. So, and we pull up the web developer tools. And I want to talk up to the right. I feel like this is really bringing back some old memories, and just want to point this out. When I wasn't really developing in this for a long time, and I was just kind of looking at it like this, it's like I'll admit this, like it's always kind of bugged me how much dead space there is over here, right? This at least ostensibly is like functional, but our view pane has always been really constrained over here for Loom, and it's always bugged me that there's just always been this pocket of dead space over here. But as we're doing this again, I'm like, oh yes, of course. Why is there always dead space over here? Because our lead developer always had a console open over here and never actually used it as a product. This was just a thing to build. It wasn't actually a tool to be used. So anyway, so okay, so we're not using income, but we're using control. So I think the first thing I want to do is do a little... God, I haven't had to do this in so long. I know we have a logger. I don't know if anybody uses the logger. If anything uses the logger inside our components. I guess here's one. Maybe we can use logger in here. I guess we'll find out. Gonna have to import this. Cool. Keyboard just broke. Here we go. Okay. Now let's log if entities log entities. Okay, let's see what we get. Interesting. Let's play a different game. I bet I can tell you where those log statements are. Here they are. That's me good. Here we go. Nope. Might also be part of it. So one of the big elements of Loom as a relatively reactive single page app is that there's a lot of svelte storage going on, which means you got to do a lot of like dereferencing on stuff, right? So there's a bunch of stuff that's undefined. But then we need it to be reactive. So I think if we do it like this, it should like. Okay, cool. Yeah. So here's this svelte state. Cool. And what have we got in here? We got an array of things. Okay. I feel like there was a way, I vaguely remembered, how to actually get to the item that's in here. I mean, the fact that there are two items in here is a good sign. So, for what it's worth, we're on like Svelte Kit, or Svelte like 2 or 3 or something like that. Theoretically, Svelte runes, which are in like 4 or 5, are supposed to kind of help manage this, but again, this project is mostly about like dragging across the finish line. The technical problems are longer lived. Here, let's try this a different way. What does income look like? Do we have an income entity here? No, we don't. I bet this is going to come down to something like, well, no, because we passed the income path along. But there are two entities in there. I guess one of them's the directory? I don't know. Here. There's the array. We'll do 0. Duck it. Hacky stuff, since we know there's at least 2 items in the array. Let's find out what we get. Okay, sweet. What do we got here? We got list and categories. Okay, so it's actually good to know. So list was the originally created entity when I first did a little test run. Categories is the new one. Income doesn't have anything, which is fine, right? Let's do a little test. Add income. Who knows? Who the fuck knows what's happening? So let's go find out what's happening. Go to our income input. Let's see. Console. Content. I mean, ties are optional, right? So, I don't know what actually happens. Is something happening on the backside? I don't even know if anything's... Maybe nothing's even getting submitted at this point. A little reload. Still undefined. Interesting. Wonder why that is. Maybe the query didn't finish properly? Lots of undefines on the console side of things. That's surprising. Look, folks, I'll be honest, this one's probably going to be a little boring. I'm going to go a little radio silent, so see what happens when this gets to post. I mean, I guess I could try and talk through it. Not a fan of this system. Okay, so mutations are like this is a front-end abstraction on top of the back-end. I think entity actions is actually what I'm looking for. Yeah, there's part of that. So here's like the JSON schema that defines what comes in and what goes out. Data type for entities. And entity actions. I think it's entity services, right? Okay, here we go. Actually, this one I should be able to like get. Okay, so let's see. Let's at least make sure our data is going to the back end. Mm, there we go. Nope, that's, I mean, yeah, that's the log. I think I said it. Yeah, content's coming in as 1,000. Um, I think we made the ties optional, but my guess is we're not actually making that an issue. If param ties, yes. What happens if there's no param ties? We update directories. We will create the entity. Content, actor, create a timestamp, now updated, space ID is fine. No path. Interesting, the path's not going through. Which means we're not looking it up properly. Although, I still feel like there should be stuff coming in at the top level, right? Because we're trying to look up everything comes back on the query. And I feel like it should be more than 2. Is the problem with like create query or something? What the fuck? How's the result only coming back as 2? Interesting. Curious what the... It's like the database not committing results or something? That can't be right, though. Okay. So, I guess before I go on, right? So the problem is essentially okay. Now, the easiest way to check this is to just gonna be to fire up pSQL and just like look at the fucking database. So that's what I'm gonna do. I think. Let's find out. Well, here. I'm gonna stop the server recording real quick just because I don't wanna. Well, mostly I just don't remember how to do this, and I don't want to inadvertently leak passwords. So, we'll be back. Okay, we're back. I think I figured it out. Basically, it was kind of what I thought it was. I just had to double check. So, historically, read entities would look up top-level entities by directory ID. But, as part of our pagination system, now we actually look things up by ties. And here's the thing. Where I thought ties was optional, because we would automatically create a tie to the directory if it was missing, that's not the case. So, all we need to do is make sure that it's tied to the directory ID, and I think we should start to see what we're looking for. Oh. That'll do it. So we won't see anything still. The entities do exist. I looked at the database. We were creating entities properly. We're just not pulling them back properly. So now we go do. Yes. Here's the other problem. They are being created now. They just don't. It just doesn't have the path to look it up. Why is that happening? Oh, right, because we're not. Control. We're not passing that path through. Income path. Right. Okay. That's the thing. Right. Is we're making it up here, but we're not actually doing anything with it. So, okay. Let me add a little. So what we're just doing here is now we just pass this bad boy through. Now whatever string we're using to look up the income, I'll pull the income off the original entities list. It's also the one that we're going to use to pass through all the way and make it with. Now we have the income path, and I think should just be able to do income path. Let's try it. I'm gonna try different values so we know it goes through. There we go. We've already got income, baby. Cool. So I'm about to hit my 100 minutes here, but yeah. So that's what developing on Loom is like. It could be better, but we're working on it. This is the first new view that's been built probably in a year. And so all of these little rough edges, all of these gotchas, hopefully if we can't smooth them out in code, we can at least document them, automate them, and iterate on them. So anyway, thanks for tuning in for part 1. Hope you come back for part 2, where we actually make the budget work. Oh, and of course, since you've been here the whole time with me, we gotta make sure we commit our code. Sync. But all this stuff should have saved, so. You get crash? I don't think so, but maybe it did. Well, let's close it out and reset it. Honestly, I should probably just learn how to use the tool inside of VS Code. It's always the easiest, but I'm just silly Willy, Okay. Oh God. Forgot about that. More generated noise. Anyway, yeah, so tune in for the next one where we actually do something about rendering that value, and then try to make it so you can create categories and try and relate the number that goes into the income field with the numbers that go into the categories field. So, yeah, thanks for joining me. Have a good night.